The Wyoming mountains don't care about your story. They were here before you arrived. They'll be here long after. And on a gray March morning, they watched a 19-year-old girl walk out of a government building with $47 and nowhere to go. The parking lot was empty. The door clicked shut behind her. She didn't look back. In her hand, an envelope. Old. Someone had written her name on the front in handwriting she didn't recognize. Inside, a hand-drawn map, a legal letter, and a single line that stopped her cold in the middle of that empty parking lot. $10. That was all it would cost. $10 to claim a piece of land in the mountains that no one wanted. $10 for something a dead man had spent a decade preparing. $10. And whatever was waiting inside a rusted building at the end of a road that didn't exist on any map. She looked at the mountains. Then she bought a bus ticket. She had no idea what was already waiting for her there. She had been a name on a form for 10 years. And then on a Tuesday morning in March, she wasn't anymore. The door of the Laramie Youth Services Center made a sound she would never forget. Not loud, not dramatic, just a soft metallic click, the kind a door makes when it has done this 1,000 times before, and doesn't particularly care what it means to the person walking through it. But to Wren Calloway, that sound meant everything, because it meant she was out. 19 years old. A backpack that had seen better decades. $47 folded inside a wallet so worn the leather had gone soft at the corners. And a sky above Laramie, Wyoming that couldn't decide if it wanted to rain or just threatened to. She stood on the sidewalk and did not move for almost a full minute. The parking lot was empty except for a green sedan and a shopping cart someone had abandoned near the fence. No one came out to wave goodbye. No one came out at all. The lights inside the building were already moving on, fluorescent and indifferent, illuminating the next problem, the next case, the next name on a form. Wren shifted the backpack on her shoulders. Looked left, looked right, picked a direction and started walking. No music swelling behind her. No slow-motion moment of triumph. Just boots on wet pavement and the distant sound of a truck horn somewhere down the highway. She walked to the corner, then she stopped. Because she had absolutely no idea where she was going. The social services office was 4 blocks away. She had to go there first, sign the final paperwork, collect her documentation, officially look the disaster that had started when she was 9 years old, and the world quietly decided she wasn't anyone's responsibility. The woman behind the desk was not unkind. She was just tired. The particular exhaustion that comes from caring about people in a system that doesn't give you enough time to actually help them. She handed Wren a thin folder, explained the contents in a voice that kept trying to be gentle and kept slipping into professional. Insurance card, emergency contacts, resources. The number for a housing assistance line that Wren already knew from memory. Then she reached under the desk and placed a second envelope on the counter. Brown, sealed. The handwriting on the front was old, blocky, deliberate. The kind of penmanship that belonged to a man who had learned to write with a fountain pen. Wren Calloway. To be opened on her 19th birthday, not before. This came into your file 3 years ago, the woman said. We've been holding it. Wren stared at it. Do you know who it's from? Wren looked at the return address. A law office in a town she'd never heard of. And below that, in a different hand, older, shakier, like someone who had needed to hold the pen tighter than usual, August Calloway, her grandfather. The man she hadn't seen since she was 9 years old. Standing at the edge of a gravel driveway while a caseworker explained in careful language why Wren was going somewhere else. The man who had looked at her with an expression she'd never been able to name. Not until now. Now she thought she knew what it was. It was helplessness. She took the envelope, thanked the woman, walked back out into the wet gray morning and sat on a bench near the bus stop. She held the envelope in both hands for a while. Just held it, not opening it yet. Because she had learned the hard way, the only way, that some things needed a moment before you let them change you. Then she opened it. The letter from the law office was short. Half a page. Clean language. The kind of letter designed to convey information without conveying emotion, which is its own kind of cruelty.
Dear Miss Calloway,
We represent the estate of August Raymond Calloway, deceased, of Harlow Creek, Wyoming. Per the terms of his final wishes, enclosed please find a recorded deed and survey map for a parcel of land located at the above coordinates. The property carries outstanding back taxes in the amount of $10. Upon payment of said taxes, title transfers to you in full. Please contact our office to complete the transaction. $10. She read it again. $10. Ren looked at the 47 in her wallet, did the math. Understood that she would have $37 left in the world if she did this. Then she looked at the second thing inside the envelope. Not a legal document, not a survey map. A cauldron of lined notebook paper, the kind torn from a spiral notebook, and on it, written in the same deliberate hand. There's something waiting for you. It's been waiting a long time. All you have to do is show up, August. She sat with that for a long time. All you have to do is show up. She had been showing up her whole life, showing up to new schools, new rooms, new families who meant well and moved on, showing up to appointments and check-ins and hearings and reviews. Nobody had ever said it like that before. Like showing up was enough. She bought a bus ticket, 5 hours into the Wyoming mountains, to a town called Harlow Creek, which didn't appear on the first map she searched, which should have been a warning, which she chose to interpret as interesting instead. The bus was half empty and smelled like coffee and old upholstery. Ren sat in the third row from the back, force of habit, the seat where nobody bothered you, and watched Wyoming roll past the window. Flat land at first. Then the land started thinking about becoming something else. Low hills, then real hills, then mountains, slow and enormous, filling the whole frame of the glass. She had lived in Wyoming her whole life and never really looked at it. Always too busy surviving the place she was in to notice what was around her. The landscape thinned as they climbed. Fewer towns. Longer stretches of pine forest and empty road. An occasional ranch set back from the highway. A hand-painted sign advertising eggs for sale. A collapsed barn that no one had gotten around to removing. She unfolded the survey map on her lap. Hand-drawn. Pencil lines careful and precise. The kind of precision that comes from a man who measured things twice and didn't trust machines to do it better. A county road, a fork, a dotted line marked old timber access leading to a rectangle at the end. Next to the rectangle, in tiny careful letters, one word: home. She looked at the word for a long time. Home. She'd had places to stay, roofs and beds and addresses, doors that locked and meals at regular times. She'd had house parents who were patient, and house parents who were tired, and one set who had been neither. And she didn't think about them anymore if she could help it. She'd never had a place anyone called home and meant it for her. The bus rolled on. The mountains got closer. A hawk circled something in a field below the highway, patient and unhurried, the kind of creature that had learned that waiting was part of the work. She folded the map, looked at August's note again. All you have to do is show up. She thought about a man she barely remembered. Sawdust smell. A pocket knife he always carried. A slow, unhurried way of explaining things. Like he assumed you were smart enough to follow and was just filling in the pieces. She'd been 9. Most of what she remembered from that age had gone vague at the edges. But she remembered his hands, big and calloused and certain. Hands that had built things. He had died 3 years ago. She hadn't known until the envelope arrived. Nobody had told her. That was the thing about being a name on a form. Information did moved around you, not toward you. Decisions happened near you without including you. And sometimes people who mattered died and the paperwork took 3 years to find you. We've put the note. Outside, the town of Harlow Creek announced itself without ceremony. A water tower, a grain elevator, a hand-painted welcome sign that had been repainted twice, the layers showing at the edges. Main Street was 4 blocks long, a diner with a buzzing neon sign, a post office the size of a large closet, a hardware store called Hadley's, a barber shop, and a 2-story brick building with a brass plate that read Gentry and Associates, attorneys at law. The bus stopped at the edge of town, let Ren and 2 other passengers out. She stood for a moment, breathing, mountain air, cold even in March, pine, and beneath it something mineral, stone and snowmelt and the deep cold of elevation. She went to the law office first. Silas Gentry was 63 years old, and had the look of a man who had spent his entire adult life in this office. White hair gone a little yellow at the temples. Round wire frame glasses. A desk organized with the precision of someone who trusted the systems around him completely. Bookshelves floor to ceiling behind him, the volumes arranged by subject and then alphabetically. No exceptions. He stood when she came in. That surprised her. People didn't usually stand when she walked into a room. He looked at her for a moment, just long enough, and something moved across his face that she couldn't quite read. "You must be Ren," he said. "I got the letter," she said. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. He sat. He explained everything without rushing. The parcel, the back taxes, the deed, the transfer process. He slid the paperwork across and showed her where to sign. She signed. He slid a second set. She signed those too. Then he opened the top drawer of his desk and placed something on the surface between them. A key. Iron. Old and dark with age, heavier than it looked, smooth in the places where hands had held it for decades, and rough in the places where time had gotten in. Your grandfather left this with the deed, Silas said. Wren picked it up, cold in her palm. She put it in her jacket pocket. Silas folded his hands on the desk and said nothing for a moment, the kind of silence that meant a decision was being made. There's one more thing I should tell you, he said. Wren waited. A man named Roland Merritt has contacted this office twice in the past year, asking about the status of the property. He paused. Attorney-client privilege prevents me from sharing specifics, but I can tell you that he knew your name before I ever mentioned it. Something shifted in the base of Wren's stomach. Not quite fear, more like the recognition of something coming from a long way off. Who is he? She asked. Silas looked out the window at Main Street, at the quiet afternoon doing its quiet things. Roland Merritt has been the most influential man in Harlow Creek for a long time, he said. He and your grandfather had a significant history. He looked back at her. The kind that tends to outlast the people who made it. What kind of history? I can tell you more when it becomes relevant, Silas said carefully. For now, just know he's aware the property transferred, and he'll be aware you're here before the week is out. Wren absorbed that, looked at the iron key in her pocket, looked back at Silas. How far is the property? 2 miles past the county road fork. You'll need to walk the last half mile. There's no maintained road in. He paused. It's late afternoon. You could wait until morning. No, she said. I'll go today. He looked at her for a moment. Something in his expression, not quite approval, but close to it. Your grandfather said you'd say that, he told her quietly. She stood, picked up her backpack, started for the door. Wren, his voice stopped her. She turned. August spent the last decade of his life preparing for today, Silas said. He wanted me to tell you that. He wanted you to know it didn't happen by accident. She held that thought for a moment, nodded once, and walked out into the afternoon. The county road out of Harlow Creek passed a few houses, then a green mailbox, then the last maintained yard, and then became gravel. The gravel became 2 tire tracks through tall grass. The tire tracks became a suggestion. Renfrew followed the hand-drawn map with her head down, and her boots finding their footing on ground that hadn't been walked regularly in years. The trees closed in around her slowly, ponderosa pine, tall and straight, their bark that particular warm orange that shows up when late afternoon light hits it just right. The air got colder as she climbed, quieter. She hadn't realized how loud everything was until it wasn't. No traffic, no voices, no fluorescent hum, just wind moving through needles and, somewhere below the hill, the sound of running water. She mapped 3 times, and then the trees parted. She walked into a clearing and stopped. The building in front of her was not what she expected, which is to say she hadn't known what to expect, but she was fairly certain it wasn't this. A Quonset hut, one of those old military surplus structures, half-cylinder in shape, sitting in the middle of the clearing like something the forest had grown around and then reconsidered. Enormous. The curved metal walls rusted orange-brown at the seams and base where years of rain had eaten through. Weeds grown high along the walls. A few windows, or where windows had been, dark and broken. Small saplings had crept close on 2 sides, as if the forest was working on a slow reclamation project. It looked like something that had been waiting a very long time to be found, and had started not long ago to give up on the idea. She walked around it slowly. Animal tracks along the northern edge. Deer, she thought. A thin line of moss along the eastern wall where moisture collected. At the front, 2 large steel doors chained together with a padlock the size of her fist. She took the iron key out of her pocket, looked at the padlock, looked at the key. They did not look like they belonged together. She tried anyway. The key went in, resisted. She twisted, nothing. Harder. The key began to feel like it might snap. And wouldn't that be perfect? Wouldn't that just be the perfect ending to this entire day? Click. The padlock gave. One clean sound that echoed off the tree line. The chain fell. She grabbed one door handle and pulled. The door groaned on hinges that hadn't moved in years. Cold air came out first. The smell of metal and time and something faintly woody like sawdust from very long ago. She stepped inside. Dark, her eyes adjusted slowly. The interior was vast. The curved ceiling high overhead. The walls bare corrugated metal, rippled and dim. A concrete floor stretching back into shadow. The kind of emptiness that feels full somehow, like the air inside had a memory. One thing interrupted the darkness. A crack in the roof, narrow, where two sections of metal had pulled apart, let in a single blade of late afternoon sun. It fell straight down and landed on a small wooden cabinet sitting alone in the middle of the concrete floor. Wren walked toward it. Her footsteps echoed once, twice. The cabinet was maybe 2 feet tall, painted green once, most of it gone. A simple metal latch. She undid the latch, opened it. Inside, stacked in 3 neat rows, were old tins, cookie tins. The rectangular flat kind with lids, the sort of tins her grandmother might have kept thread in. Each one a slightly different color. Blue, green, red, silver. And on each one, a strip of white tape across the top with a year written in black marker. 2013. 2014, 2015, 2720, 2719, 2020, 2021, 2022, and tins, one for every year between her 9th birthday and her 19th. She reached for the one marked 2013 and opened it. Inside, a roll of bills secured with a rubber band. 20s, mostly. Beneath the almost piece of note paper, folded twice. She unfolded it. You were 7 this year. I heard you liked drawing. I hope you still do. Her hands went still. She put it down, reached for 2015. Money, different role, same care. 2015, the year you lost your dad, I tried to get to you. The system said no, I'm sorry I wasn't there, I need you to know I tried. The building was very quiet. She could hear her own breathing. She opened 2017. You're 11. I drove past your school last month just to see the building. I didn't go in. I didn't want to confuse things for you. But the school looked good. You looked like someone who was going to be all right. Rin sat down on the concrete floor. She didn't mean to. Her legs just decided for her. 10 tins. One for every year she'd been in the system. Every year she'd been somewhere she didn't choose. And every year, this man, whoever he really was to her, had been putting money in a tin and writing her a note she wouldn't read until she got here. He had been keeping track. Not from across a room, from across the state, maybe from further. Just keeping track, year by year, tin by tin. She sat with that for a long time. Then she reached to the bottom of the cabinet, below the last row of tins, and found something else, a book. Leather cover, dark brown, worn at the corners. A name pressed into the leather in letters that had once been gold, now faded to a shadow of themselves. August Raymond Calloway. His journal. She held it with both hands and did not open it. Not yet. Instead, she looked around the building. At the bare metal walls. At the cracked concrete floor, at the ceiling where that single beam of sunlight was already warming to orange as the afternoon moved on. This was what he had left her. Not just money, though there was clearly money, more than she could count right now without her hands shaking. Not just a building, though it had walls and a roof and a floor and a door with a lock that answered to her key. A beginning. And somehow that was harder to hold than anything else he could have given her. She opened the journal to the first page. The handwriting was the same. Deliberate. Unhurried. A man who believed that if something was worth writing, it was worth getting right. Wren. If you're reading this, it means 2 things. First, you made it to 19. Good. I wasn't always sure the world was going to be kind enough to let that happen, but here you are. Second, you were curious enough to open the cabinet. That's you. That's always been you, even when you were small. How about you to know what was inside everything? You don't need to understand this place right away. You don't need to know what to do with it. You don't even have to like it. But I need you to stay. Just for a while. Because this land has something it wants to show you. And it can only do that if you're here. The money is not the point. I know it looks like the point. It isn't. The point is the ground under your feet. No one can build anything without somewhere to stand first enough to say. Stay, Wren. August outside, through the crack in the roof, the light had gone from gold amber. She looked around the building again, at the rusted walls, at the concrete floor, at the cabinet with 10 years of tins lined up in careful rows, at the shadows pooling in the far corners where the afternoon light didn't reach. She wasn't going to find a motel tonight. She could see that clearly. $37 left, a town 2 miles back. And this place, this strange, enormous waiting place, with walls and a roof and a door that locked. She got up and explored the far end of the building before the light went completely. Found a pile of old canvas drop cloth stiff with age but intact. A folded wool blanket on a shelf near the back wall, mothballed but whole. And there, half buried under years of accumulated debris and rusted tools, something she hadn't expected. A cast iron wood stove. old, heavy, grimy. But cast iron doesn't die easily. She pulled the debris away and looked at it. The base was solid. The door still open though it complained. The flue pipe still ran through its collar in the wall. She couldn't use it tonight. She'd need to clear it first, check the pipe, find wood. But it was there. August had known it was there. August had written about it. She'd find out later. In the early pages of the journal, notes about the building's structure, what needed attention, what would hold. He had been thinking about this place for years, planning it for the person who would come after him. She made a bed from the drop cloths in the corner nearest the door, put her backpack under her head, wrapped the blanket around her shoulders. The building made small sounds as the night air cooled the metal. Wind moved through the pines outside with a sound that was almost but not quite like voices. She thought about the nun marked 2015. Year you lost your dad. I tried. She had spent a long time being angry at people who weren't there. It had kept her warm, that anger. Useful the way things you carry for protection are useful. Heavy but yours. She'd never really considered that some of them had been trying. She was almost asleep when she heard it. An engine, distant at first, then closer, though a low rumble of something heavy on the road outside. She opened her eyes and lay still. A wide bar of headlights swept slowly under the front doors left to right, then stopped. The engine idled. She sat up, didn't move, didn't breathe more than necessary. The light sat there for a full minute, maybe longer. Then the engine picked up and the light moved on. The sound faded back into the trees and the dark. Wren lay back down. Sleep came slower this time, thin and watchful, but it came. Morning arrived through the crack in the roof, not the warm old gold of afternoon, but the white gray of early March light. She sat up, looked at the cabinet with the tins, looked at the journal, looked at the front doors, stood up and walked to the doors and opened one. The clearing outside was silver with frost, the trees dark and still, birds beginning somewhere in the distance. She looked at the ground near the door, boot prints in the soft earth near the frame, big, flat-soled, not her boots, smooth-soled, work boots. Leading up to the door, stopping close enough to touch it, then turning and walking back toward the road. Someone had come in the night, had stood at her door, had looked and decided, for now, to leave. She stood in the doorway for a long moment. Then she went back inside, put the journal in her backpack, latched the cabinet, picked up the iron key, and headed for town. She had $37, a list of things she needed, and somewhere behind her sternum, something that wasn't quite hope yet but was leaning in that direction. She walked out of the clearing and into the morning, the building standing behind her in the frost, its rusted walls catching the first thin warmth of the dead day and holding it, patient and still, the way things hold what they've been given. Hadley's Hardware had been on Main Street since 1974. You could tell by the floor. Old pine boards worn smooth in the center where 50 years of boots had passed through. The shelves were tall and close together, organized in a system that made complete sense when someone explained it and no sense before that. Levels next to rope, next to sandpaper, next to a specific type of bolt that Wren wouldn't know the name of for another 3 weeks. It smelled like machine oil, like sawdust, like a place where actual work happened by people who knew what they were doing. She pushed through the door, and a small bell rang overhead. The man behind the counter didn't look up right away. He was reading a newspaper, a real one, printed on paper, folded the old way, with the focused attention of someone who believed that if you were going to read something, you should actually read it. Then he looked up. Birch Hadley was 66 years old, and built like someone who had spent those years doing things that required sustained physical effort. Wide shoulders, hands that looked capable of tightening a bolt without a wrench, gray hair cut short, a face that had been in warming weather for decades, every year of it without apology. He looked at Wren. She looked at him. "Help you?" He said. "I need tools," she said. "I'm not sure which ones yet." He set the newspaper down. "What are you working on?" She thought about how to answer that honestly. "A Quonset hut," she said. "Out past Old Timber Access Road. Roof needs patching, each wall is buckled, there's a cast iron stove that needs clearing, and the whole interior needs everything." Something changed in his face. Not dramatically. The way a room changes when someone turns on a lamp in a far corner, the same room but different. "What's your name?" he asked. "Wren Calloway." He was quiet for a moment. The kind of quiet that isn't absence, it's the presence of something being processed. Then he reached under the counter without another word and brought up a canvas bundle. Set it between them and unrolled it slowly on the counter surface. Tools. Old but clean and well kept. A hammer with a hickory handle worn smooth. Wood chisels in 4 sizes, a handsaw. A level with a brass casing, the kind made to last rather than to be replaced. Each one in its own loop of the canvas, arranged by size, smallest to largest. August left these here in 2019, Birch said. His voice was even, factual. He said he wouldn't be needing them anymore. Said to keep them until his granddaughter came for them. Wren looked at the tools. She had not cried yet. Not in the parking lot outside the youth center, not on the bus, not on the concrete floor last night. She had been holding everything very carefully, the way you carry something liquid in an open container. Small movements, constant attention. Don't let it tip. She was not going to cry in a hardware store. She was absolutely not. He knew I'd come, she said, which wasn't what she meant to say, but it was what came out. He knew, Birch said. Simple as that. She picked up the level, turned it in her hands. The bubble sat perfectly centered. She put it back. What else do I need? She asked. Birch walked her through the store without being asked. Named things. Explained uses. Not talking down. Filling in information the way you do when you assume the person in front of you is capable and just hasn't had access to this particular knowledge yet. There's a difference, and she noticed it. She bought what she could afford. Weather stripping. A box of nails in 2 sizes. Sandpaper in 3 grits. A small pry bar. 2 cans of stove blacking. A wire brush. She borrowed the canvas roll of August's tools, which Birch handed over without any discussion of terms or return date, because they were already hers. He was just finally able to deliver them. She was heading for the door when he spoke again. August Calloway Peltolbaft. He said it the way you state something that doesn't require emphasis because it's simply true. Elementary school on Birch Street. The roof on First Methodist after the twister in 2007. Grain storage for the Pulaski operation north of town. The Henderson family's barn out on Route 16. He paused. He never charged full price once. Wren turned back. Then 2012 happened, Birch said. And he was gone. He looked at her steadily. Most people figured he left because he was angry, because the town didn't do enough. Didn't stand behind him the way it should have. He glanced out the window at the street, then back. I always thought there was more to it than that. Now I think I know what it was. What? Wren asked. Birch looked at the empty counter space where the canvas roll had been. He had something more important to do, he said. She didn't go back to town for 3 days after that. There was too much to do and she needed to understand what she was dealing with before she could know what else to buy. So she worked with what she had, the canvas roll of tools, the materials from Hadley's, the drop cloths, the blanket, the camp stove she'd bought on the way out of Laramie for $11, that she had not anticipated being this grateful for. The first full day she spent on assessment. She went over the building systematically, section by section, the way August's journal described. He had written an entire early section on the structure's condition, what was original, what had been repaired before, what was holding and what was failing. She followed his notes like a map. The roof crack she'd already identified was worse from the outside. 2 panels had shifted where a mounting bolt had rusted completely through, creating a gap just wide enough to lose heat through all winter and let rain in all spring. The east wall panel, 3rd from the north, exactly as August had noted in a diagram tucked into the journal's back pages, had buckled inward from what looked like storm scum damage, the metal warped in a slow, permanent curve. The concrete floor was sound but cold in a way that said it had been cold for a very long time. The stove was the first thing she fixed. 2 full days of work. She pulled away every rusted tool and piece of debris that had accumulated around it over years of disuse. Found the base solid. Found the door still functional, just stiff. Cleaned the flue pipe connection with the wire brush until the metal showed through. Applied the stove, blacking into careful coats the way the label instructed. By the end of the 2nd day, her hands were black to the wrist, and her back ached from crouching, and her palms had developed blisters she hadn't had before. She looked at her hands and thought, without quite meaning to, about August's hands, the ones she remembered from when she was small. Already calloused, already certain. She hadn't known then that she'd end up doing this. She didn't know yet what she was becoming. But her hands were starting to figure it out before the rest of her did. On the 3rd evening she built a fire. Small, tentative. She used dry pine from the tree line. Kindling she'd split badly and unevenly with the axe Birch had included in the canvas roll. The first strike of the match went out. The second caught. She crouched in front of the stove door with her arms around her knees and watched the flame take hold, grow, settle into something steady. Orange light moved up the curved metal walls. The building filled slowly, not with heat yet, not enough of it, but with the promise of heat. She sat on the floor and felt something she hadn't let herself feel in a long time. Not safe. Not exactly. She knew better than to use that word carelessly. But something adjacent to it, something in the direction of it. She stayed very still and let it be there without naming it. In the morning she started on the east wall panel. Found the replacement bolt size in August diagram notes, 3/8-inch lag screw he'd written, with a note that Birch Hadley's would carry it. Hiked to town, bought a box of them, hiked back. Spent the afternoon learning by trial and error how to remove the warped panel. Straighten it against the ground with the pry bar and her body weight and some words she would not repeat, and remount it properly. The third attempt held. She stood back and looked at it. It wasn't invisible work. You could see where the repair was. The metal didn't quite match the curve of the surrounding panels. But it held. It would keep weather out. It would last. She put her hand flat against it. Solid. At night she read the journal by flashlight. August's writing in the middle pages was practical, measurements, materials, diagrams, notes on what the building needed and did in what order. But between the practical entries were other things, observations, thoughts, the writing of a man who knew he was leaving something behind and was trying to make sure it was complete. September 2016, he had written. Septi finished a job outside Casp. Good work, barn restoration for a family named Ellsworth. They paid fair. Came home, I say home, I mean the room I rent on Tuesdays, and put this month's amount in the 2016 tin. Added up everything so far. Not enough yet, need 3 more years at least, maybe 4, patience. And then, 2 pages later. I have been thinking about what Wren will need most. Not money, though she'll need that too. What she'll need most is a place that belongs to her. Not borrowed, not temporary. Not contingent on behavior or grades or whether someone of Galtrovich decides she's doing well enough, just I don't know how to give her much else from here. But I can give her that. Wren put the journal down on her chest and looked up at the ceiling. The stove crackled softly. The crack in the roof was visible as a thin dark line overhead. She'd have to deal with that soon, before the next rain. But for now the building held its warmth. She thought about unconditional. She thought about what that word had meant in practice over 10 years. How often it had conditions. How the conditions shifted. How you learned to read the room, read the adult in charge, read the situation, and adjust yourself accordingly because that was survival, and survival was the point. And now here was this building, this ridiculous, rusted, enormous building in the middle of Wyoming trees. And it didn't have conditions, it just had a key, and she had the key, and that was the entire arrangement. She picked the journal back up and kept reading. He arrived on a Thursday afternoon, 3 weeks into her time at the property. She heard the truck first. Diesel engine, heavy, expensive, the particular sound of a vehicle that cost more than some people's houses. It came down the dirt road slowly and stopped at the edge of the clearing. Roland Merritt stepped out. He was not what she had been picturing, and that, she realized immediately, was probably calculated. 57 years old. Put together carefully in a way that took money and effort to make look casual. Flannel shirt that cost more than flannel shirt should cost. Good boots worn deliberately. Silver hair trimmed close. He walked across the clearing with the unhurried ease of a man who had never once in his life wondered if he was welcome somewhere. 2 other men stayed by the truck, arms loose. Not doing anything obvious, just present. Roland stopped a few feet from Wren and looked at the building first. A long, assessing look, almost proprietary. Then he looked at her. "You must be the Calloway girl," he said. "I must be," she said. He smiled. Easy. The kind of smile that had been practiced so long it looked natural from the outside. Roland Merritt. He extended his hand. She shook it, briefly. "I heard someone was finally out here," he said, looking back at the building. "Thought I'd introduce myself. I'm something of a neighbor. My operation runs along the south boundary of this parcel." He turned back to her. "How are you finding it?" "Fine," she said. "Good country up here." He nodded at the tree line as if he owned it, which he very nearly did. "Your grandfather was a stubborn man about this place. Wouldn't hear a word about alternatives. I always respected that even when it frustrated me." Another easy smile. "Stubborn is something I understand." Wren said nothing. "I'll be direct with you," Roland said. not pausing for her to respond to the claim of directness. I've had an interest in this parcel for a long time. August and I couldn't reach an agreement that was between him and me, and it stayed there. But you're a different situation. You're 19 years old and you've got your whole life in front of you. He looked at her steadily. I'd like to make you an offer, a serious one. $130,000. She looked at him. $130,000. She was standing in a clearing with blistered hands and a jacket with a broken zipper pull and $31 left in her wallet. $130,000. No, she said. He didn't blink. You don't have to decide right now. I didn't say I needed to think about it, she said. I said no. Something shifted behind his eyes, barely visible. A tightening that came and went so fast she almost missed it. It's a substantial amount, he said. It is, she agreed pleasantly. He waited, as if waiting for her to fill the space with explanation or apology or reconsideration. She didn't feel anything. She stood in the clearing and looked at him and let the silence be his problem. Finally he nodded, turned toward the truck, then stopped. Didn't turn around. Just paused there with his back to her, looking at the tree line. Winter comes early up here, he said. Almost conversational. Almost. It doesn't agree with people who aren't prepared. Then he walked to his truck and both men got in without speaking, and the diesel engine started and they drove back up the dirt road and out of sight. Wren stood in the clearing and listened to the engine sound fade into the trees. Then she went inside, sat down on the floor, breathed. $130,000. She thought about August's note in the 2015 tin. I tried. She thought about the boot prints outside her door that first morning. She thought about Silas Gentry's careful voice. He knew your name before I mentioned it. She opened the journal to where she'd left off. Not because she wasn't shaken. She was. But she had learned a long time ago that the best response to being shaken was to find something solid to hold on to. And the journal was the most solid thing she had right now. Silas called on a Tuesday, 2 days after Roland's visit. Can you come in? His voice was measured in a way that meant the measuring was deliberate. She walked to town in under 40 minutes now. She knew the road by feel, where the gravel got loose next the culvert, where the tree roots had buckled the dirt on the left side of the track, where you could cut 30 seconds just by angling through the gap in the fence line. Silas had the door open before she knocked. He poured 2 cups of coffee without asking, set one in front of her, sat across the desk and looked at her with the expression of a man delivering something overdue. I owe you more than I gave you at the first meeting, he said. Okay, she said, Roland Merritt. He wrapped both hands around his cup. When I told you he had an interest in the property, that was accurate but incomplete. A pause. In 2012, Roland's development company commissioned a geological survey of land along the northern county boundary. The survey identified a significant underground aquifer running beneath your property. Deep, clean water, large enough to supply the residential development Roland had been planning on the adjacent parcels for years. Wren listened. He approached August privately first, offered to purchase. August declined. Roland filed suit, asserting shared water rights, claiming his project established prior usage interest in the subsurface water. Silas's voice stayed even. The case ran for 3 years. August won. But winning isn't free. Silas looked at his colleague. He's lost works. The stress of litigation for a man in his 60s who was already not in the best health. He stopped. By the time the final ruling came, August had lost most of what he'd saved. His health had changed. He left Harlow Creek 8 months after the verdict. Everyone thought he left angry. Yes. But he wasn't. Silas looked up. He left because he had a plan. And the plan required time and mobility and the ability to work wherever the work was. He set his cup down. He took every carpentry and restoration job he could find across Wyoming, lived simply, traveled light, for 10 years. And every year, Wren said slowly, he put money in a tin. Yes, she was quiet for a moment. How much? Silas met her eyes. Across all 10 tins, the total is somewhere between $82,000 and $87,000. We're still working out the exact count. He paused. He wasn't a wealthy man, Wren. He was a man who decided what mattered and spent a decade acting accordingly. She looked at her hands on the desk, the new calluses, the stain under her thumbnail from the stove blacking that hadn't come all the way out yet. He told me once, Silas said, the last time I saw him, about 8 months before he died, that the thing he regretted most wasn't losing the years to the lawsuit, wasn't the money, wasn't having to leave this town that he'd helped build. He paused carefully. He said the thing he regretted was that he'd never found a direct way to tell you he was there. That he knew. That he was sorry he couldn't do more. Ren was quiet for a moment. He found a way, she said finally. It just took longer to arrive. Silas nodded slowly. The way people nod when something they hoped would be true turns out to be true. There's one more thing, he said. Roland will not let this go with one declined offer. He has resources, and he has patience, and he has motivation that goes beyond money. This has become a matter of principle for him. If he finds a legal avenue, he will use it. What kind of avenue? I don't know yet, but I want you to know it's possible. He looked at her directly. I want you to be prepared, not surprised. Ren thought about Roland standing in her clearing with his back to her, not turning around. Winter comes early up here. I'm not easy to surprise, she said. The storm came on a Thursday evening in late March. No real warning. The mountains make weather on their own schedule and don't consult anyone's forecast. The sky went gray all at once, like someone pulling a shade, and by dark it was snowing sideways, and by 10 o'clock the wind had found its range. She heard the roof go at 1 in the morning, not catastrophically, not the whole thing, just the east corner section, the area above the original crack, where she hadn't gotten to the reinforcement yet, where the weakened mounting had been holding on by the tolerance of marginal metal in bad weather. The wind got under it and peeled it partway back with a sound like something being torn open. Cold poured in immediately, then snow, blowing horizontal, building fast into the corner SD's sleeping area. She was up and moving before she was fully awake. Grabbed the large tarp she'd bought at Hadley's, still in its packaging. She hadn't needed it until exactly now, and the coil of rope near the stove. Pulled her coat on over her sleep clothes, boots without lacing them properly. Grabbed the flashlight, went outside into the dark and the sideways snow and the wind that made thinking difficult. Getting up onto a Quonset hut without a ladder in a blizzard is not something anyone would recommend. She used a stack of wooden pallets she'd salvaged from behind the hardware store, not stable, not safe, the only option available, and climbed since the turfed mid of the building with the tarp rolled under one arm and the rope over her shoulder and the flashlight clamped between her teeth. She almost fell the first time. Her left boot slipped on the snow-covered metal and she dropped the flashlight and grabbed a seam bolt with both hands and hung there for a moment, each cheek against the cold metal, wind pulling at her coat. She thought, very clearly, this was a poor decision. Then she thought about the 2015 tin. I tried. She got her footing back, kept climbing. The top went over the gap. Not perfectly, not neatly, but over it. She weighted the near edge with a concrete block she'd hauled up on the rope in an operation she did not enjoy and would not repeat. Ran lines through the tarp grommets and around the mounting bolts and back down to anchor points she improvised on the ground, using the largest rocks she could move in the dark. It took 2 hours. She got back inside at 3 in the morning, soaked through, hands numb past the wrist, her right knee aching from where she'd hit the pallet edge on the way down. She stood by the stove, which had held its fire through all of it, because she'd fed it well before bed, and shook. Not fear, cold mostly, exhaustion, and something else that sat below the exhaustion and had no clean name. She was so tired, not just tonight, not just the roof, from years of it, from always being the person who figured it out alone because there was no other option. From the particular weariness of competence born of necessity rather than choice. She opened the stove door and fed in another piece of wood. Sat on the floor with her back against the warm iron and let the feeling come up and then pass without fighting it. That was all she could do with it. Let it come. Let it pass. Get up in the morning. At first light she heard the truck. She was already awake, listening to the wind drop off, watching the gray morning come in through the new snow-dusted windows, eating the last of the crackers she'd been rationing since Tuesday. Then boots on the ground. Then 3 knocks on the front door, deliberate, evenly spaced. She opened it. Birch Hadley stood in the gray morning light. He looked at the top on the roof, at the rope lines running down to the rocks, at the snow packed against the east wall. He looked at her face. He didn't say, "Are you okay?" or "What happened?" or "I can't believe you did that by yourself." He said, "Got the right bolt size. 3/8 lag, like August diagram called for," and he held up a paper bag from the hardware store. Behind him his truck, and in the truck bed lumber, sheet metal, a toolbox. And behind the truck, coming down the road on foot because there wasn't room in the cab, 4 more people. Georgie Patak with a level under her arm and a thermos in her hand. A man named Dale with a nail gun in a case. Two others Wren didn't know yet but would. Nobody had been called. Nobody needed to be. The light she'd rigged outside her door, a small flashlight in a tin can that threw light upward, had been visible from the county road in the storm. People had noticed. And in a town of 800 people who remembered August Calloway, noticing was enough. By noon, the roof section was properly secured. New mounting bolts, new weather stripping along the seam, a sheet of metal over the original gap that would hold through 10 Wyoming winters. The east wall repair she'd done weeks earlier got reinforced while they were at it. Georgie helped Wren hang the first interior dividing wall, rough-cut tint on a frame, not refined, completely functional. Georgie stood back and looked at it when they were done. August would approve, she said. Did you know him well? Wren asked. Well enough. Georgie handed Wren the level. He taught my son to use one of these, 14 years ago. My son still has the one August gave him. She looked at the wall they'd built. Good people leave things behind. August left more than most. That evening, after everyone had gone and the building was quiet again, Wren sat with the journal. She was near the end of the written pages now. August's handwriting had slowed in the later entries, still deliberate, but taking more effort, the letter forms a little larger, the lines less perfectly even. The handwriting of a man whose hands were tiring after decades of hard use, but the thoughts were clear. January 2022, he had written, and she would learn later that this was 8 months before he died, though he hadn't known then how close it was. I have been carrying something for 7 years that isn't mine to keep. It was given to me for safekeeping and I have kept it safe. But Wren is the one who should have it, and I have not known until now how to make sure it reaches her. I have given it to Della Voss for safekeeping. She will know when to hand it over. She will wait until Wren comes looking. The rest is up to Wren. But Wren read it twice. Della Voss. She went back through the earlier pages looking for the name. Found it once briefly. Stopped by Della's on the drive through last April. She sends her love. I didn't tell her it was for you. I didn't know how to explain it yet. Something he'd been carrying for 7 years. Something that wasn't his, which meant it was someone else's. She didn't let herself finish the thought. Not yet. She had learned, slowly, incompletely, but learned, that some things needed to arrive in their own time. That reaching for something before you were ready to hold it just meant dropping it. She put the journal on the shelf she'd built herself, slightly crooked, perfectly functional, entirely hers, and lay down on her camp mat and looked up at the patched roof. The stove burned low and steady. The building held its warmth. She would find Della Voss in the morning. Della Voss lived on Juniper Street in a house the color of old sage. Not greens exactly, not gray. That particular in-between shade that houses get when they've been painted and weathered and painted again over many decades, and the layers have started talking to each other. The kind of color you can only get with time. Dried flowers hung from the porch ceiling in bunches, lavender, something yellow, something white that had gone cream with age. Wind chimes made from mismatched silverware turned slowly in the morning air. A doormat that read, "Come back with a pat," a quaint which Wren stood on for a moment, reading before she knocked. The door opened before her knuckles finished. Della Voss was 71 years old and had the eyes of someone who had spent decades paying close attention to things. Clear, dark. The kind of eyes that had seen enough of life to stop being surprised by it, but had not stopped being interested. She looked at Wren. Not the way most people looked at her, not assessing, not cautious, not with the particular careful neutrality of someone deciding how much this person was going to cost them. Like she recognized her. "I was wondering when you'd come," Della said. "You knew I was here," Wren said. "Harlow Creek is 800 people," Della said. "Come in." The inside of the house smelled like coffee and old books, and something faintly herbal, dried rosemary maybe, or thyme. Shelves everywhere, organized densely but not carelessly. A life that had been fully and completely lived in this space for a long time. The kitchen at the back had a window overlooking a small yard with an apple tree just coming into bud and a bird feeder, where 3 sparrows were conducting an ongoing disagreement about territory. Della led her to the kitchen table. 2 cups of coffee appeared without discussion. Della sat across from her and folded hands and looked at her the way people look when they're deciding where to begin something that has been waiting a long time. "You look like your mother," Della said, around the eyes. "August used to say that. He'd show me the photographs sometimes." She paused. "He kept photographs." Wren went still. "I didn't know he had photographs of me. He had a full envelope of them. School pictures, mostly. The district sent progress reports to a post office box he maintained for years. He paid a small annual fee to stay on the notification list. Della wrapped her hands around her cup. He never missed a report card. Not one. Wren looked at the sparrows in the yard. Still arguing, probably always. He talked about you. He talked about, Della continued, every time he came through town. Which wasn't often the last several years, but when he did, she stopped, shook her head slightly. He talked about you the way people talk about things they're certain of. Not loudly, not with explanation, just certain. You're certain about something you know is true because you've watched it be true for a long time. He didn't know me, Wren said. She said it carefully. Not with anger, not with grief. Just with the precision of someone who had learned to say accurate things about her own life. He left when I was 9. He never called. He never wrote. He wrote, Della said. Wren looked at her. Dozens of letters over the years. Della's voice was steady and direct. He never sent them. He was afraid of complicating your situation. You were in the system. There were rules about contact. He didn't know how to reach you without potentially creating problems he couldn't be there to fix. She paused. Whether that was the right decision, I'm not certain. I told him I wasn't certain. He wasn't certain either. He carried that uncertainty for a long time. Wren absorbed that. A man who wrote letters he didn't send, who maintained a post office box to receive school reports, who drove past a building and counted windows and told himself the light in a particular room might be hers. Was that love? Was that enough? She didn't know. She genuinely did not know. She had been trying to answer that question for years without realizing she was asking it, and the answer still wasn't simple. Both things could be true at once, that he loved her, and that it wasn't the love she'd needed, and that it was still more than most people got. All three at once. That was allowed. You said he left something with you, Wren said. Something he asked you to keep. Della nodded, stood, went down the hall without hurrying. Wren sat with her coffee. The sparrows had sorted themselves out, 2 eating side by side now, the third perched on the feeder hook just above them, watching, waiting for an opening. The apple tree moved slightly in a morning breeze. The kitchen clock on the wall made a sound every 60 seconds that Wren had already stopped noticing. Della came back with an envelope. Letter-sized, plain exterior. No address, no postmark. The paper had gone soft with time, the color of cream left in the sun. On the front, in handwriting Wren didn't recognize. Not August careful block letters, something different, looser, written with the speed of someone who needed to get something down before they lost their nerve. For Wren, when she's ready. Wren's hands were steady. She was surprised by that, because everything else in her body was not. August brought to me in 2019, Della said quietly, sitting back down. He said, hold this for her. Give it to her when she was looking, not before. She looked at Wren across the table. He made me promise. What is it? Della looked at her for a moment, long enough to be sure. Then it's from your father. He wrote it in the summer of 2014, the year before he died. The world went very quiet, not silent. The sparrows were still there. The clock still marked its 60 seconds. The apple tree moved in the breeze. All of it continued without interruption. But underneath all of it, quiet. The particular quiet of a moment that separates everything into before and after. Wren looked at the envelope in her hands. Thomas Calloway had died in September 2015 in a worksite accident. She had been 9 years old, and what she had been told was minimal, and what she remembered was fragmented. The caseworker's voice, a specific quality of afternoon light, the feeling of a floor under her feet and not knowing what to do with her hands. She had 3 artifacts of her father's existence: a blurry photograph, a first and last name, and the fact of having been born to someone, until now. She opened the envelope. Inside, 4 pages. Both sides of 2 sheets of standard notebook paper, the lines slightly uneven, the handwriting pressing harder as it went, the way writing goes when someone is working against something, urgency or time or the knowledge that they might not finish. A photograph, small, slightly worn at the edges, the corners soft from handling. 2 people, a young man, maybe 20-25, and a little girl of 3 or 4. He was holding her up to see something in a tree above them, a bird maybe, or something that had caught the light, and she was laughing. Head thrown back, completely, unguardedly delighted. He was laughing too, looking up at whatever she was looking at, caught in the same moment. She had never seen her father laughing before. She had never seen a photograph where he looked like someone who laughed. She sat with it for a full minute, just the photograph. Just that image of two people sharing a moment neither of them knew she would need someday. Then she read, August. I know we're not the kind of people who write letters, or talk about things directly for that matter. That's probably something we both should have worked on a long time ago and didn't. I'm willing to call that one shared responsibility. I'm writing this now because I have something to say and I need the words to be right. I'm not good at getting words right out loud. You know that about me. It's one of the things we have in common and neither of us has ever said so. I need to talk about Ren. She's 8 years old right now. You saw her in the spring when you came through. You know what she's like. She has opinions about everything. What socks are acceptable? Which direction makes more sense to walk to school? Which variety of apple is objectively superior? And don't try to argue with her because she has considered this thoroughly and you will not win. She is the best thing I have ever done. I know that's something every parent says. I mean it the way I mean it. She is better than me. Smarter, funnier. More stubborn, which is a real achievement given the gene pool. She is going to be something, August. I don't know what yet, but something real. I'm not sick. I'm not writing this because something is wrong right now. I'm writing it because I work construction. I have worked construction for 12 years. I know what job sites look like, and I know what can happen, and I know that some days things go wrong without warning, and you don't see them coming. So I'm writing this now, while everything is fine, while I can. If something happens to me, I need Ren to know something. Not now, not when she's 8. She's too young to carry it properly yet. But when she's older, when she's looking for somewhere solid to stand. I need her to hear this. From the day she was born, there has not been a single day I didn't think about her. Not one. Not even the hard days. Especially not those. Not because of anything she did or didn't do. Not because she was good or easy or accomplished. Just because she's her. Just because she exists. That is the complete reason. That's all of it. She is going to have a hard time, I think. Not because she isn't strong enough. She is stronger than she knows right now. But the world doesn't make room easily for people who don't fit the standard shapes. It takes time. It makes them prove themselves before it lets them in. I need her to know that however long that takes, she was already loved before any of it started. Before she proved anything. Before she earned anything. Just automatically. Completely. From before she could even remember. Tell her that for me. When she's ready to hear it, Thomas Wren read it twice. Then she put it down on the table and pressed both palms flat against the paper and breathed in, out. Della did not speak, did not move, did not reach across the table or offer anything. She simply sat there with her coffee and let the room be what it needed to be. Outside, one of the sparrows had claimed the feeder entirely. The other two had moved to the apple tree branches. The morning was going on without them. Wren picked up the photograph again. Thomas Calloway at 25. Holding his daughter up towards something worth seeing, both of them laughing at the same moment. She had been there. She just couldn't remember it. But he had. He had remembered it enough to keep the photograph, and to trust it to August. And August had trusted it to Della. And Della had kept it for 6 years waiting for this exact morning in this exact kitchen. She was already loved before any of it started. She thought about 10 years. 10 years of earning the right to be where she was. 10 years of reading rooms and managing impressions and calibrating herself to whatever situation required. 10 years of being a name on a form that moved through a system. And underneath all of that, before all of that, this, she folded the letter with care, the original folds, and put it back in the envelope. Put the photograph with it. Held the envelope in both hands for a moment. Then looked up at Della. Thank you, she said. 2 words. Not enough and exactly right. Della nodded. Picked up her coffee. August knew this would be a lot, she said quietly. He said, give a time after. Don't try to fill it. Wren almost smiled. He planned that too. He planned everything he could think of, Della said. She looked out the window at the apple tree, the sparrows settling, the morning going on. That was how he loved people. He wasn't good at being present, but he was very good at preparing, at making sure the things that mattered would still be there when they were needed. She paused. It's an imperfect way to love someone. He knew that. Did it work? Wren asked. Della looked at her across the table. You're sitting in my kitchen, she said. You haven't sold the land, and you just read a letter from your father for the first time. She set her cup down. I think it worked. She walked back to the property slowly. Not because her legs were tired, because she needed the time. 3 miles through Harlow Creek, and out the county road and down the tire tracks into the trees. She'd walked this route enough times that her feet knew it without the map. Where the gravel shifted near the drainage culvert, where the tree roots had pushed up through the dirt on the left side, where the gap in the fence line saved 30 seconds if you cut through at the right angle. Her feet knew this place. When had that happened? The morning was clear after the days of storm. The sky, that particular hard blue that comes after weather, has cleaned everything out. The mountains were sharp-edged and white on the peaks. The pine trees dripped slowly in the warming air, snowmelt ticking from branch to branch in a sounds like small patient applause. She walked and thought about her father. Not the abstract fact of him, which was all she'd had for 10 years. The actual person. The man in the photograph who laughed with his head tilted up. The man who had written 4 pages longhand in the summer of 2014 because he worked construction and understood probability. I know what can happen, and I know that some days things go wrong without warning. He had been right. He had been right about his own life a year before it happened, and he had done the one thing available to him, written it down and trusted it forward. She thought about what kind of person did that. Not a perfect person. He hadn't been there either. Not in the way she'd needed. Not in the ways that mattered day to day. But a person who, when he understood his own limitations and the limitations of time, had tried to hand something across the gap anyway. The letter was in her jacket pocket. She could feel the weight of it, not heavy, just present. The way something important is present even when you're not looking directly at it. The clearing came into view through the last stand of trees. She stopped at the edge and looked at the building. It looked different than it had the first day. Not because the building had changed much, though it had, incrementally, section by section, but because she was different. She had been looking at it with working eyes. Eyes that noticed what held and what needed reinforcing, and what would be beautiful if you gave it the right attention. The tarp was still visible on the roof, pale against the dark metal. She'd replace it properly when the weather settled. The east wall repair was solid. The front door hung true, and the windows she'd cleaned let the morning light in without apology. It was not a finished thing. It was a beginning that had been given enough attention to show what it was trying to become. She went inside. The stove had gone cold overnight. She built a new fire methodically, tinder first, then kindling, then 2 split logs set at the right angle to catch without smothering the flame. The match caught. The fire took hold. She sat back on her heels and watched it. Then she took the envelope out of her pot and placed it in the cabinet with the tins, carefully. In the front of the cabinet, between the tin marked 2022 and the inside of the door, where she'd see it every time she opened the latch. She stood there for a moment. 10 tins, 1 letter. A photograph of 2 people laughing in a moment she couldn't remember but would never forget. This was her family. Not the shape she would have chosen, not the version she'd imagined as a child in the way all children imagine the family they don't have, but real. Specifically and unmistakably real. A grandfather who planned in silence for a decade. A father who wrote ahead of his own death. An old lawyer who stood up when she walked in the room. A hardware store owner who had been holding a set of tools for 6 years. People who had arranged themselves around her life like load-bearing walls, not visible from the outside. Doing their work without being seen. She opened the journal, the last page August had written. I think this is the last Esther entry. Not because I have nothing left to say. I never run out of things to say, which is part of the problem. But because the rest of it belongs to her now. The pages and the story and the next part. I hope she knows what I was trying to do. I hope it translates. You spend years building something for someone, and you can never be certain they'll understand what it was built for. Whether the work will say what you meant it to say. But I think she'll know. She always understood things, even when she was small. She had that quality, the ability to look at something and see not just what it was but what it was trying to be. Past the surface to the intention. Give her time. Give her the land and the tools and the tins. She'll do the rest. August she closed the journal, sat with it in her lap for a long time. The fire was established now, the stove ticking as the metal warmed. The light from the south-facing windows coming in at an angle that reached the far wall and made the rough-cut timber glow faintly gold. She would do the rest. She picked up her hammer and went back to work. The legal notice arrived on a Wednesday morning in early May. Silas called before she'd eaten breakfast, which told her something about how seriously he was taking it. She walked to town, sat in his office, read the document he slid across the desk. It was 4 pages of dense legal language from a firm in Cheyenne, not Roland's usual local attorney. Someone brought in specifically for this. The argument cited a clause in Wyoming property statute regarding mineral and water rights as appurtenant interests, rights that attach to land and must be explicitly addressed in estate transfers. The claim was that August's estate transfer had not adequately resolved the subsurface water rights established as a contested interest in the 2012 litigation, and that those rights therefore remained in legal ambiguity. In plain terms, Roland had found a crack in the paperwork. Small, technical, arguable, but present. How serious? Wren asked. Serious enough to require a formal response, Silas said. Not so serious that the response is difficult. He took his glasses off, cleaned them, replaced them. The 2012 ruling was explicit on water rights. Judge Harlan ruled in August's favor with specific language about subsurface ownership. Roland is essentially attempting to re-litigate the same question using different statutory framing. He looked at her steadily. It's not a strong argument, but it will take time and it will cost money to defeat it properly. Wren thought about the tins, about 10 years of careful, patient accumulation, about what August had saved it for. Use what we need, she said. You should understand the potential cost, Silas. She looked at him directly. He didn't spend 10 years putting money in tins so I could lose the land to the same argument that already failed against him once used to use what we need. Silas looked at her for a moment. Then he picked up his pen. All right, he said. Let's answer this. The filing went in that Friday. And then, because this is what legal matters do, it waited. Wren went back to the property and kept working. Because there was work to do, and because work was the thing that kept the waiting from becoming the only thing. The interior was transforming section by section. The bedroom wall she and Georgie had built was joined by a second wall, creating a proper entryway near the front doors. She built a workbench along the north wall, not level on the attempt, better on the second, right on the third. She ran a shelf along the east wall, slightly crooked, completely functional. She built a proper storage area for the tins, not in the cabinet anymore, but on a dedicated shelf section she framed and mounted herself, each tin labeled, each one visible. Not hidden, not tucked away, present. Birch came out 2 Saturdays and worked alongside her without being asked, without making it a favor, without it anything other than 2 people doing work that needed doing. He taught her things. How to read wood grain before cutting it. How to set a nail without splitting the timber. How to identify which repairs were cosmetic and which were structural and why the difference mattered. My grandfather built things for other people his whole life, Wren said one afternoon while they were framing the entryway. He did, Birch said. He was good at it. He was the best I've ever seen, Birch said. Matter of fact. No sentiment around it. Just accurate. I think he was trying to teach me something, she said, without being able to teach me directly. Birch set a nail and drove it home in 2 strikes. What do you think he was trying to teach you? Wren held the timber level while he set the next one. That building something takes longer than you expect, and costs more than you plan, and the thing you end up with is never quite what you pictured. She paused. But it's still yours, and it still stands. Birch drove the second nail. That sounds about right, he said. The community showed up as small communities show up for things that matter to them. Not loudly, not all at once, but steadily. Georgie brought dinner twice without being asked. Dale, the man with the nail gun, left a box of lumber scraps near the door that she could use for smaller projects. A woman named June from the diner had to including extra bread whenever Wren stopped in, without comment, without making it a thing, not charity. Something else. The particular kind of support that grows around someone who is clearly trying hard and not asking for help but could use it. The kind that doesn't require gratitude or acknowledgement, that just shows up and gets set down and goes away again. Wren accepted it without deflecting. That was new for her. Learning to receive things without bracing for the cost. The decision came on a Thursday morning in the 3rd week of June. Silas called at 7:15. We won, he said. 2 words. Clean and complete. Wren was sitting on the concrete floor with her coffee and the journal in her lap. She'd been reading the early entries again, August 1st descriptions of the property, his initial plans, the methodical way he'd worked through what needed doing and in what sequence. She'd been checking her own work against his notes. She held the phone and looked at the south-facing windows. The morning light came in at a low angle and lay across the floor in long, warm rectangles, reaching the far wall, touching the shelf of tins. Did Roland contest it in session? She asked. He filed an objection immediately, Silas said. Judge Harlan denied it in the same session. The 2012 precedent held completely. There was nothing new in Roland's argument, only new language for an old position. A pause. The judge's written ruling notes that the estate transfer was procedurally clean, that the property rights transferred fully including subsurface water rights, and that the prior ruling is binding. Another pause, slightly different in quality. He also noted in his closing remarks that this court had ruled on this question once before and reached the same conclusion, and that the opposite had not changed. Wren heard something under the measured professional delivery. You're pleased, she said. I have been waiting 13 years, Silas said, to see that man hear those words twice from the same bench. He paused. I am extremely pleased. She went to Hadley's that afternoon. Birch was behind the counter when she came in. He looked up from the order form he was filling out. Not a newspaper today, actual inventory work, she told him. He set the pen down. Good, he said. That was all. Just good. The same flat, accurate word he used for things he'd known were true and had simply been waiting for the world to confirm. She started to go, then stopped. Birch, she said. Yeah. When August came back in 2019 to leave the tools, did you talk to him? Actually talk to him? Birch was quiet, considering. Yeah, he said finally. For about an hour, he was driving through on his way to a job in Sheridan. Stopped in, had coffee, left the canvas roll. He looked at the space behind the counter where the roll had been for 6 years. We talked. What did he say? Birch looked at the window. At Main Street in the June afternoon, people moving through their ordinary days. The town going on as it always went on. He said he'd spent his whole life building things. Birch said slowly. Houses, barns, structures. Things that would stand after he was gone. He said he regretted the one thing he wished he'd built earlier and built better was a bridge. A bridge, Wren said, between himself and the people he loved. Birch's voice was steady and careful, the voice of someone carrying something real without setting it down. He said he'd gotten so focused on building for other people that he'd forgotten to build toward them. And by the time he understood the difference, there was only one bridge left he had time to build. He paused. He said he hoped it wasn't too late to do it right. Wren looked at her hands, calloused now, working hands. The blisters from the first week had hardened into something permanent, part of her in a way she hadn't expected to be grateful for. It wasn't too late, she said. No, Birch said. Doesn't look like it. She went back to the property. The last thing she built that summer was the porch. Small. Just large enough for 2 chairs and room between them. Timpani frame, simple joinery, nothing elaborate. She'd planned it on paper first, the way August's journal had taught her. Measurements before materials, intention before action. She built it over 4 days. Mostly alone, mostly in the morning when the light was good and the air was still cool enough to work comfortably. The framing went up on the first day, the decking on the second, the railing on the third. The 4th day was finishing, sanding the rough spots, treating the wood against weather, adjusting the one post that had settled slightly overnight and needed shimming. Birch came out on the 4th day without being asked and looked at what she was building and picked up a spare piece of timber and started on the far railing without comment. They worked in silence for 2 hours, the kind of silence that only exists between people who have stopped needing to explain themselves to each other. When it was done, they stood back and looked at it.
She asked.
Birch pulled a level from his belt. He always carried one, she'd noticed, the way some people carry pens, and placed it on the railing. The bubble sat dead center. Level, he said. She brought out 2 chairs, set them on the new porch, facing south, toward the tree line, toward the gap in the trees where the mountains were visible in the distance. Blue-gray and permanent. The kind of presence that made you feel small in a way that was actually a relief. They sat. The afternoon light was long and gold coming through the pines. The wildflowers that had appeared along the cleared edges of the property, not planted, just arrived once the ground had light to grow toward, moved slowly in a breeze. A hawk circled something above the far tree line, patient and unhurried. Can I ask you something? Wren said. Sure. When you saw me come through that door the first morning, when I said the name Calloway, what did you think? Birch was quiet for a moment. I thought August was smarter than I gave him credit for, he said. which is saying something because I always thought he was pretty smart. She looked at the mountains. I didn't know what I was coming to, she said. I had $47 and a letter and a map. I didn't know about the tins or the money or any of it. I just came because the letter said to. That's all he needed, Birch said. He said that once, he said. All she has to do is show up. The rest is already there. The sun moved lower. The shadows from the pine trees stretched across us the clearing, long and dark and cooling. She thought about all of it, the whole arc of it. A man she barely knew spending 10 years building something for her in the only way available to him. A father who understood probability and rode ahead of it. A town that remembered what someone had built for them and showed up in a snowstorm without being called. None of it was the story she would have written for herself. All of it was more than she'd known how to ask for. After Birch left, she sat alone on the porch as the evening came in. The sky went through its summer colors, amber, rose, deep violet, until the stars began. More stars than she'd ever had reason to look for, living in towns with streetlights and schedules and no time to be still. She went inside and got the journal, came back out, sat in the dark with the stars overhead and the wildflowers invisible in the meadow, and the stove warm behind her through the open door. Found a pen in her jacket pocket. She kept one there now, out of habit, the way August had always carried a pocket knife. She opened the journal to the first blank page after August's last entry. And she wrote, August, the porch is level, Birch checked. I've been trying to figure out what to say to you. I've started this 3 times. Each time I end up saying the same thing in different arrangements. So here it is straight. I understand now. Not everything. Not the complicated parts. Not the years. Not the question of whether the choices you made were the right ones. I'm not sure I'll ever fully understand those. I'm not sure that's mine to decide. But I understand what you were trying to do. You couldn't give me a childhood. The system closed that door before either of us could stop it. So you gave me the next thing you could think of, a place to land when I was old enough to choose where I landed. 10 years of tins, a building, a key that actually worked. It's imperfect. I know you knew that. I know you knew a key in a cabinet of savings wasn't the same as being there. You knew and you did it anyway because it was what was available. I read Dad's letter. I'm not going to say much about that yet. Some things need to stay quiet for a while before they become words that work. But I want you to know I got it. I understood it. And I understood, because of you, why it reached me. He trusted you. That means something. It means you were the kind of person who could be trusted with the most important things someone had. That's not a small thing to be. I'm going to keep building. The East Wing is still untouched. I have plans. Birch is skeptical about the plans, but he'll help anyway because that's how he is. I want to put real windows along the north wall and build out a proper kitchen and eventually address the flooring situation, which is currently still concrete, and I've made my peace with it for now, but only for now. But I mean building the other thing, the thing underneath, the reason the house matters. I'm going to stay here, not because I have no other options. I'm 19. I could go anywhere. I'm staying because this is where the ground is solid, and because someone made it solid for me before I knew I'd need it, and I'm not going to let that go to waste. You were right about the foundation. It matters more than what you build on top of it. I know that now in my hands, not just in my head. The strongest thing I have right now is not the money, not the land, not even the building. It's the fact that you believed I was worth preparing for. I'm going to try to be worth it. Thank you for finding a way when there wasn't a clear one. Thank you for the tins. Thank you for the key. When she put the pen down, sat for a moment with the journal closed in her lap, the pen resting on top. The stove behind her made its slow ticking sound as the metal settled into the night temperature. An owl called once in the far trees. One call clean and single, then nothing. She looked out at the clearing. The wildflowers were shapes in the dark, but she knew they were there. She'd watched them come in over the weeks. First the purple ones near the east wall, then the yellow ones along the path she walked every morning, then the small white ones that had appeared everywhere all at once the way some things do, without announcement, simply decided to be present. She had cleared this ground herself, every foot of it. Weeks of work, moving debris and cutting weeds and pulling saplings and raking until the soil could breathe. She had given it light and left it alone, and the flowers had chosen what to do with that. She stood up, carried the journal inside, placed it on the shelf next to the envelope from Della, the letter from her father, and the photograph of 2 people laughing. and next to the row of tins that ran along the wall from 2013 to 2022. She stood back and looked at the shelf. All of it together. 10 years of tins. One letter written forward in time. One journal passed from one generation to the next with blank pages at the end waiting. Her life in objects. The evidence of people who had loved her in the ways available to them. She turned off the lamp. The stove threw soft amber light through the glass door. It reached the shelf, the tins, the journal's worn leather cover. It reached the rough-cut timber walls and the level shelf and the workbench with the shim she'd cut for the short leg. A piece of oak. Fitted precisely, not cardboard anymore. She'd fixed it properly last week. It reached the new porch through the open door, where 2 chairs sat facing south in the dark. Outside, the stars over Wyoming were doing what Wyoming stars do, filling the sky with more light than seems possible, the kind of abundance that recalibrates something in the chest. 19 years old, 1 rusted building, 10 tins, $47, then 37, then everything. Not perfect, not finished. A beginning that knew it was trying to become. She lay down, the building held its warmth around her, and for the first time in as long as she could reach back and find, Wren Calloway closed her eyes without waiting for something to go wrong. She just slept.